that are needed.
Thank you, Ms. Rees, and it is a pleasure to serve with you in the chair. I'm grateful, very grateful, for the honourable member for Strangford for bringing this debate. This is a topic which he speaks on with great passion, with great compassion, with great knowledge, particularly in light of his chairmanship of the APPG for the promotion of freedom of religion or belief. And I know the honourable lady, the member for Kilbride, Stratharven and Leslie fulfills a dual role, because I have no doubt that were she not in her party's spokesperson role in this debate, she would be speaking there with as much passion and conviction as she does. And I'd also like to thank her for the custodianship of the office that the FCDO has in Scotland. And I'd also like, I'm pretty sure actually, this is the first time that I have responded as a minister for the honourable lady in her position as Shadow Minister, and I welcome her to her post. I'll try and address the points she raised, and of course it would be remiss of me, and I will mention her later on in my remarks, it would be remiss of me if I didn't also congratulate the speech made by my honourable friend, the member for Condalton, and also congratulate her in her role as the Prime Minister's envoy for this incredibly important area. Freedom of religion or belief is a universal human right, but as has been highlighted by everyone that's spoken today in one way or another, it is denied to millions around the world. And attacks on this freedom go hand in hand with attacks on other human rights. It goes hand in hand with other violations. It goes hand in hand with other abuses. And it has been mentioned that, of course, religious persecution is not limited to women, but the simple truth is, just in so many other areas, the plight of women when it comes to this is often amplified, is often made worse, and as we have heard on a number of occasions, and I'll make reference to this also in my speech, it is not just the religious persecution, but it is the use of sexual violence which makes this even more horrific, even more painful, even more pernicious. And a number of the people that have spoken today have highlighted specific examples of where women have been the recipients of the most appalling sexual violence and abuse. And as the Honourable Lady says, it is done in the name of religion, but it has nothing to do with religion. And we have to recognise this. The recent report from Aid to the Church in Need shone a light on how women and girls are particularly vulnerable to being targeted, as I say, with sexual violence, using religious belief as an excuse. Some have been forced to convert, often under pain of death. And in the face of such grave attacks on human rights, it is up to the world's democracies, of course, including the United Kingdom, to champion freedom for all. That's why we continue to work in close coordination with our international partners on a range of measures to address this. From our work through the UN to call out the violations of human rights and to call for support for those affected, to the aid projects that are working at the grassroots with communities, with religious leaders to protect the rights of minorities. My noble friend, the Lord Ahmed of Wimbledon, is leading in these efforts at a ministerial level, and the Prime Minister, as I said, the Minister for these rights and the Prime Minister's Special Representative for preventing sexual violence in conflict. In November 2020, Lord Ahmed launched the Declaration of Humanity. This united leaders from many faiths and beliefs in a common front, calling for the prevention of sexual violence in conflict and denouncing the stigma faced by survivors, a point that the honourable gentleman made. And that's a stigma which in some cases prevents women and girls seeking refuge in the families that they grew up in. The declaration attracted strong support. More than 50 leaders from countries including Iraq, Kosovo, Sierra Leone and Sri Lanka have thus far signed it. And I know that the Lord Ahmed works closely with the Prime Minister's Special Envoy on this issue. I'm going to embarrass her now, so I hope she prepares for this. She is such a powerful advocate, and I admire her hugely for this. I know she's strongly engaged, very effectively engaged with advocacy groups. I knew I was going to struggle getting that one out for some reason, including Open Doors and Aid to the Church in Need, who recently hosted an International Women's Day event. As my honourable friend said at that event, we must continue to call out countries who fail to take action, whilst continuing to work at grassroots level to effect change. And we know that communities are stronger when everyone is included. So I would like to highlight some projects that are already making a difference around the world. The honourable gentleman and others have mentioned Pakistan, and in Pakistan we are funding programmes to protect women and girls, including protection from religious or belief minority communities, protecting them from forced marriage and gender-based violence. And we're working with community leaders at village level to try and change social behaviours, because changing the position of government, and the Honourable Lady mentioned the stalling of legislation that goes through, and of course we will continue to encourage Pakistan to pursue the right legislation, but legislation and governmental action alone is not enough, which is why we do seek to influence at grassroots level as well through the funding that we provide, through the ODA funding that we provide, which is directed towards Pakistan. And we've supported the government of Pakistan to set up 8 courts to provide child-sensitive justice to victims of child abuse, child trafficking and child marriage. The plight in Afghanistan was raised, and of course we backed the UN Human Rights Council resolution to establish the mandate for a special rapporteur to monitor and report on the human rights situation there. And this includes the challenges faced by women and girls from religious or indeed non-religious communities. And we are directly supporting the United Nations Population Fund activities to prevent gender-based violence, and launched with the International Rescue Committee programming specifically designed for the protection of women and girls. The Honourable Lady asked about the resettlement scheme, and we are providing 20,000 women and girls and others at risk with a safe route to resettlement in UK. And we're on track to resettle an estimated 5,000 this year. The situation in Syria remains grave, but we're working to support women and girls affected by human rights violations and abuses, including freedom of religion or belief, through our National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security. And we've allocated £22 million to the UN Population Fund in Syria to support this work. The awful situation in Iraq was raised by a number of members, particularly the persecution perpetrated by Daesh. We have seen horrific crimes perpetrated by that group. Many are still living in difficult conditions because they have children born of sexual violence and face very significant barriers to rejoining their community because of that stigma. My honourable friend for Congleton took a leading role in pushing for the International Religious Freedom or Belief Alliance statement, calling for minority communities displaced by Daesh to be allowed to return home in safe, voluntary and sustainable ways. The situation in China was raised with great passion by the Honourable Lady for Luton North. We must keep the situation in Xinjiang in the public eye. Where there is evidence of the scale and severity of human rights violations being perpetrated against the Uyghur Muslims, we can see that it is far-reaching and it paints a truly harrowing picture. Reports, as she said, including forced sterilisation and testimonies of rape and torture and forced separation of families. Such terrible violations of human rights must be called out, must be highlighted on the international stage, and that's why the Foreign Secretary challenges these violations. That's why she challenged these violations in an address to the UN Human Rights Council earlier this month. The honourable gentleman and others highlighted or asked about the situation in northeast Nigeria. And there are ongoing attacks by terrorist groups, including Boko Haram and Islamic State West Africa, which have caused immense suffering to Muslim and Christian communities as these groups seek to undermine community cohesion. They seek to split communities apart. It is something which the UK government takes a close interest in, and we continue to work with the Nigerian government. He spoke about, the Honourable Lady spoke about those girls who were taken by Boko Haram, many of whom have still not been returned, many of whom their whereabouts is still unknown. Of course, we condemn unreservedly the abduction of those girls. We continue to call for and work towards their release, and we will continue to work with the Nigerian government on those cases and other cases that are well known. Looking ahead, the United Kingdom will host a Freedom of Religion or Belief conference in July, as has been mentioned. This will be a critical moment for us to drive collective action and promote respect between different religious and indeed non-religious communities around the world. Planning is underway, and my honourable friend, the member for Congleton, I know, will continue her key role in helping to deliver that. And she knows, we know, that she pushes us hard in the department. She works with great passion, great alacrity, and I'm quite sure that my officials and ministerial colleagues will not thank me for saying this, but she plays an incredibly important role in ensuring that we work with the same speed and passion as she does, and she holds our feet to the fire, which is perhaps not exactly how the Prime Minister envisaged the envoy role. But nevertheless, she plays an important part, as do the shadow front bench, as do the members of all party parliamentary groups, because this has got to remain a collective endeavour. I will.
As today as to whether or not, as members of the all-party group, that we could visit the department to hear about the work that's being done directly.
I have. I shot a quick look across to my officials. They have heard that request. I'll be completely honest with you. At the moment, The situation in Ukraine means we are still in response mode to that. So the normal generosity of spirit that my department demonstrates is being stretched somewhat, but we do recognise this is an important issue. We will seek to find a time as soon as possible to liaise, and I suspect that the cavalry are going to ride to my rescue.
Yes, thank you, Minister, for allowing me to. I'd be delighted to facilitate such a meeting in the department.
Told you. Look, this is, as has been said, this is at times shocking and painful when we hear specific cases, as have been brought up in the committee today. They are harrowing beyond belief. There are people who, in their communities and societies, are already the least powerful, have the most suppressed voices, and once again find themselves the target of misogynistic persecution and attack and sexual violence in the name of religion, but not driven really honestly by that religion. So we will continue to champion freedom and democracy around the world, freedom of religion or belief, gender rights. These will remain at the forefront of our international efforts as a government. Thank you, Chair.
Alan, would you like a couple of minutes to sum up?